Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to Last Hit, an LCS podcast, episode 3, with myself, Dash, and Artemis. How you doing, my dude?
Good. I'm doing excellent.
How's the Flex team doing? Are they Challenger yet? Are they on their way to the LCS?
Dude, we haven't. So I'm coaching a Flex team. We haven't met yet. And
Okay.
The story there is it was so funny. So last podcast, I gave you guys an update on my coaching, and I said I only have a few spots left. So this Flex team reached out to me, and they wanted to reserve in advance because they're winning all their games right now. They're on like a 70% win rate or something.
Oh, too good.
But they wanted to reserve basically a lesson in case there was too high demand.
Gotcha.
So they're crushing it right now. But I'm working with a 9-year-old this afternoon. After we record this podcast,
this.
I'm going home and I'm working with a 9-year-old, which is super exciting.
Sweet.
Because
what lane does this 9-year-old play?
dude, he plays everything. He hasn't specialized yet, so he still hasn't made his way through all the champions once.
Dope.
He's got like 20 left or something. He's been playing for 3 years. He started off like playing Yumi only like 2 years ago with his dad.
Very cool.
It's so cool because we're working on the game, but also like for a 9-year-old, like you got to work on like the emotional regulation piece of it, which is so hard for a 9-year-old. But what's cool is the research shows the earlier that you start to expose kids to these tools for self-regulation and like all these performance-related psychology tools, the better they actually get as they age. So this kid's gonna be a little superhuman in a few years. So I'm excited.
He's gonna blow past me in my elo at some point. Dude, I'll watch him fly by me.
I mean, when I first saw the kid's film, I was like, I don't know what I was expecting, but I was not expecting what I saw. Like I was like, what? This kid is 9? Just looking at the mechanics. It was crazy, man.
That's so dope.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
What about you? What's cooking?
Ooh, God, I don't know. Not a ton is new. We had Super Bowl Sunday, and this was the first time in a decade that I've gotten to watch the Super Bowl because I have been on the LCS and
that's true.
Just the nature of the host position, right, is that I'm on the whole day. So even in years past, like some casters, right, they have the early set of games and they can make it to the Super Bowl or something. Or like teams, maybe you play the early games one year and you can make it to the Super Bowl. I have never made it to a Super Bowl since I started hosting. And so this year I was able to do it. I mean, and in fact, the whole LCS team could because obviously no weekends anymore. So actually Kobe and Raz came over and we just hung out, watched the Super Bowl. Had some beers and stuff like that. But honestly, other than that, it's been pretty chill for me this week, which is a good thing. We did upgrade to 2 mics. Look at us.
1 mic.
Dose mics.
It's a party.
Oh, my goodness. And then soon, again, we'll continue to upgrade. We've got a new camera on the way and stuff like that. But yeah, for me, it's just been a lot of housework and chilling out, which is good. That's good. So week 3 LCS, everybody.
Super week!
It's just super week. 15 games.
Sorry.
Oh my God.
I'm excited.
I'm excited too. It starts tomorrow, Wednesday. We are recording this on Tuesday, so we're getting it in under the wire here. But because there are 15 games and 3 whole days, we decided in talking about the episode this week that we were going to take a little bit of a different approach. I mean, one, we don't want this series or this podcast in and of itself to become super monotonous.
No.
And so we're not just going to do the breakdown every game from last week and do the predictions for every game this week.
But I want to. I'm tempted. I could talk about the games all day.
We are tempted. And we will talk about a few of the games. We've cherry-picked a few that we're very interested in, and we'll get to those later in the episode. But we wanted to kick today off, actually, by diving into one of the lanes. And we say this, or I say this, but while putting the caveat out there right at the top that, all right, power rankings, number 1, we know that the teams have not played the first round robin, the whole first round robin.
Correct.
So there will maybe be some people that say this is unfair for you to try and power rank a lane before everyone's played everybody. We get that. We concede that. Whatever.
Life's not fair.
But at some point, you got to start power ranking. And if we want to get through all of the lanes at some point in this split, we got to start now. So we're going to the mid lane. After much discussion, we thought that would be a fun one to dive into. We think there will be some significant differences between our lists. But also just flat out, before we get into our own tier lists, the mid lane to us felt like one of the ones where a lot wasn't going the way that's expected in terms of when we were thinking out our power rankings, like, ooh, there's some names here that you would definitely expect to be in other places.
Yeah.
So it got interesting for us quick.
Okay, I won't spoil it.
Well, you can go if you want to go with your first.
I guess compared
our first one is not going to
jump into our
anyone.
list.
Yeah.
Before the season, I won't spoil it, but neither of us have Jensen, in the top half of our list. None of us in the top 3/4 of our list. But before the season,
but we're not going to tell you where he is.
Before
just
the
yet.
season, if you tell me that Jensen is there, I say
top 5. He's top 5,
right,
guaranteed.
He's got to be top 5, top 6, right? And then also, at least me, I am pro JoJo biased. I'll admit that. I expected him to be better right out the gate than I've seen. So it's more fun, I think, this way. And also Gory, too. I mean,
exactly.
we had like some unexpected new mids really, really performing.
Let's get into it. Let's get into it.
Start me off with the top of your list. Who do you think is the best mid in the LCS right now, based on what we've seen?
All right, number 1 in the LCS, and I think this one is not really debatable, but largely because the team itself is still undefeated, and so it gets really hard to judge individual players when the team has not taken any losses. So for me, number 1 is Vikla. I mean, not only is the team performing incredibly well, but every single person on that team seems to be performing really well. I've enjoyed the way that he has actually meshed with Spica as well. That's one of the things that I think a lot of times when you talk about mid laners, especially on new teams or newly formed rosters, is, how quickly is that jungle mid duo really going to start working well together? And I think they play incredibly well together. And so for me, that would kind of be my biggest reason why he's up there at the top spot, is that he seems to work fairly seamlessly with Spica while being on the undefeated team. What about you?
Totally valid analysis. Similarly, I had Vikla at the top of my list, and like you, I've been impressed because his team is like so damn good. Like, let's be honest, FlyQuest almost looks untouchable. I think you could easily make the argument that they're the best team in the West right now. And coming into this season, I think that was not my expectation. I didn't think they'd be this good, and because of that, I put a lot of that on the back of their mid laner, because we've seen Spica not look like this. TSM is a great example. Like this Spica, as you mentioned, looks totally unleashed playing with Vikla. And as a jungler, you only have the options available to you that really your mid laner can provide to a certain extent, because so much of what you can do is dictated by your mid laner's movement or capacity to move in the future.
Right.
Potentially, right? So the fact that Spica is so unlocked to support his side lanes has a lot to do with his mid laner just kind of dominating and making a lot of space for him. So yeah, really impressive Vikla, and I'll kind of keep going into my 2-3 because
next?
The top of the table for mids and LCS is really cool, I think. I have like Vikla, JoJo, Maple.
We have the same
Gory,
top 5, but in a different order. I've just actually looked further into the list, and I'm realizing
maybe
now
we just show that.
We have the exact same top 5, different order. So your top 5 order is?
I have Vikla, JoJo, Maple, Gory, Bjergsen. And the order of that is a little bit like muddy still.
Yeah, I agree.
But I've been really impressed. Maybe not really impressed, with the exception of Bjergsen. I think Bjergsen has met my expectation pretty solidly. But with the other 4, I've been like pretty impressed in certain ways.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So my top 5, while it is the same 5 players, it is a different order. So here's my order. It goes Vikla, followed by Bjergsen, actually number 2, Maple, number 3. So we match there, Maple number 3. And then I have Gory matched in number 4, and then JoJo. So actually, I guess in reality, what we did is we flip-flopped JoJo and Bjerg.
Oh.
But what's interesting there is I think, kind of to your point, is like, I think Bjergsen has outperformed my expectation. And my expectation actually largely comes from what I saw last year from him in his return, which is that he was an ultra solid mid laner, but gone are the days of total lane dominance Bjergsen, which is how he used to play the game. And also, now is the age of League of Legends where that style doesn't even really work. And so my expectation had been reduced to, I guess, given last year, that Bjergsen's going to lane solidly, but he was actually less proficient at a lot of the side lane plays last year, I would say, than players like Palafox, who I actually saw making more efforts, Blaze Olive even, making more efforts on the rise and things to get to side lanes and play a little bit more what is, classically known as the superior mid lane playstyle. So for me, this, 2 in the power ranking, 1 represents kind of the jump that I see in Bjergsen from last year specifically to this year, where he is, again, actually able to get out of his lane a little bit more. Maybe it's because he's got double lift, and double lift just wants attention in the bot lane, and so he's calling for it, or what. I don't really know what the genesis of that is. But I've seen a little bit more out of him this year than last year, and I think as well as the Zilean pick, which I give, like, you get points for that, because when you have a pick that warps drafts, I think your value raises incredibly.
Yeah, the fact that you still have to ban Zilean 4 or 5 in this guy's like 10th year in LCS is crazy. I mean, we still don't have an answer to his Zilean in any meta, which is crazy. But let me tell you why I have Bjergsen a little bit lower, and make the case for why I have JoJo so much higher. I think that for me, one of the biggest aspects that I look for in a mid laner is the ability to create for themselves. Because I think that it's in the early game, a lot of times it's the tip of the spear. And this guy is going to walk up to the enemy mid laner, and on the first wave, he's going to say, "Can you trade with me?"
Right.
And he's going to find out real quick, like, if the matchup is going to play at the theoretical highest level. Oh, it looks like I can't get push. Or he's going to test you and figure out, oh, this guy actually doesn't know the matchup as well as me. He's actually not as good as me. So I can take more from him than I otherwise might not be able to. And they're always taking the maximum, right? And they create for themselves. And Bjergsen still, to this day, with the exception of his Sylas game, because he had a Sylas game where in team fights I felt like he was making so much space, and I kind of saw shades of another mid laner, but Bjergsen is the type of mid laner to go for the Zilean and 50-50 that lane and be way smarter than you and be way more effective than you in team fights. But he needs to be hot dropped into that mid game where his AD carry is in a good spot and the map is in a good position. And like when he's in that game state, Bjergsen is dominant.
Right.
But did he break the game open for you? Did he create for himself? And like that's where I look at JoJo's game against C9 on day 2 of LCS on the Tristana against C9, and I was like, that was the JoJo that I wanted to see, because JoJo absolutely 1v9 that game on Tristana. Like, he got early lead, he finally got like the turret or plates on side lane, like they finally got the gold on the Tristana, and he never looked back. He was playing on the front foot in team fights, he was doing so much damage, he was just daring basically C9's front line to come at him, and he carried the game on his back. And that's the kind of performance I see from JoJo. Like, that's the kind of performance I see from Vikla. Even Maple and Gory, I see more of that from than Bjergsen. So it just kind of goes back to what I value, I think, from my mid laners. Yeah. And I've been really impressed with JoJo recently. I feel like he kind of was waffling at the beginning of the season, but he's stepped up in a big way.
I just want to clarify at that point. You said matchup against Cloud9 they lost. Are you talking about? And that was their first game of the whole.
No, EG.
Oh, EG. Sorry, I was thinking 100 Thieves. My bad.
No, EG. JoJo's,
okay, gotcha.
Game, his tryst against C9.
Yeah. Okay, you're right. Yeah, week. It was okay, but their first game against Golden Guardians, which is the one they won. See, that's a game.
From week 1 LCS.
Yeah, from week 1.
I throw that shit out, man.
Oh,
it's like,
you can't
I don't throw it out, but like. Come on.
Well, so okay, but that
I'm
is
seeing the trajectory I want to see, right? Like
totally.
His most recent game, he dominated. He put the team on his back.
Yeah.
For me, JoJo's back.
Fair enough.
After that game.
Fair enough. Okay. I think I'm still wanting to. I think with 6 games for me, with a couple of those being games, is not the level of consistency that I want out of who I believe should be the best mid laner in the region, right? And who defined himself as the best mid laner in the region last year. So I think that's why I docked JoJo points. And maybe that's unfair to be comparative to the form that he was in before. I see everything you're talking about, and the point's definitely taken, because actually that game 1 that they lost against Golden Guardians actually exemplifies that to me. Like, he walked into that lane going, I'm going to create winning moments, right? I'm going to test the limits of this. Okay, it didn't go very well because he got ganked, whatever, and that's fine. But yeah, I think for me, Bjergsen has actually impressed me in that I don't think he's had, from recollection, a really hard losing moment yet this split.
He's been super stable.
So I think that's what I'm just giving him so much credit for, is stability, and then showing me market improvement in a few areas that I thought were incredibly lacking in his game last year.
Totally
and so
fair.
Therefore, JoJo for me sits in 5th. And again, maybe that's just being unfair as a comparison, where he is playing against himself in my mind, where the 2 people I have in front of him, Maple and Gory, well, Gory obviously I have very few comparisons for, much younger guy. Maple, okay, man's been around the block. But I thought he was going to come in kind of with the classic tale of like retirement home, doesn't really find his footing or change TSM around a ton. And I think he's had some incredible creativity in his picks as well as his play. I think his side lane play, the Galio pick that he had in week 2, has been very impressive to me. So Maple, honestly, I don't know. He's my number 3 right now because I think he's one of the biggest reasons why TSM is where they are in the standings.
Yeah, he's number 3 for me too. And what impresses me about Maple is this is not the Maple that like we saw last year on TSM. It's not like this is a new Maple, and you got to credit Boogic because I think that there is a lot of existing synergy between the mid jungle of that TSM, and he looks really unlocked and he looks really good. If you think of TSM's wins, they all fit the exact same structure. You got solo and a tank in the top lane. You have their bot lane on something that they can pressure with and actually be on the front foot. And then you have Maple on something that he can push mid with and affect bot lane with. Like he had a beautiful Talia game. Most recently, he had a Silas game in the recent win. Like even on his Azir games, he's not the kind of Azir that's like trading 50-50 farm. He's more like the Jojo Azir where he's actually pushing the lane, winning the 1v1, opening up spaces for his team. So and then he carries team fights. Like he's really clean in team fights. So Maple basically for me, he checks all the boxes of what I demand from a mid laner is that he's creating for himself. He's like translating that to his teammates, and then he's actually dominating team fights and carrying.
Awesome.
I think Gory, he's another guy in our top 5. I have him above Bjerg. It's really a call out on like just how impressed I've been.
He's just really good.
Him, you know, he's the real deal. And I thought he's just had a really high level understanding of his matchups twice in his two of his 6 games. He's had really technical lane control and generated some significant CS leads just based on his lane manipulation in a pure 1v1. And it's nice to see that because a lot of times rookies, any player can do this, but especially rookies, they might get too carried away with like what the team needs, or you're thinking about so many things in the pro game that like sometimes you kind of get lost on winning your matchup. But he seemed to do both, where he was generating a really significant 1v1 advantage in the spot that required it, and then he was also executing in team fights at a high level. Like I like the way he was like pressuring the flank. I'm visualizing the way he plays team fights. He's really comfortable starting team fights on a flank. Really like Jojo-esque and like Vikla-esque. You know, like our really dominant mid laners kind of have this air to them that like, yeah, you can start the fight on me, bro, because like it's gonna go bad for you. Like, see what happens. And he's almost daring you to start the fight on him, and I love that.
No, I 1,000% agree. Like his laning has been very solid, but the most impressive thing for me, given how young he is, right? Because typically that's the thing that takes some time is team fight confidence, right? When you know that like, ooh, if I make the mistake, it could spell disaster for all 5 members of my team. Nope, this guy's Azir secking in. Like, you know, he's finding his angles and he's looking to be aggressive. Not every play is going to work, but yeah, I've been super impressed by his tenacity in team fights, his willingness to go in, and the angles that he's been willing to find. And so that's our top 5. Again, I'll just recap. Mine was Vikla, Bjergsen, Maple, Gory, and then Jojo. For Artemis, it was Vikla, Jojo, Maple, Gory, and then Bjergsen. So really all we did was flip-flop Jojo and Bjergsen from 2 to 5 between each of us. From there, we jumped down into our 6-7 positions. And funnily enough, we're flip-flopped here as well, while we do have the same 2 players. I am going with Diplex, followed by Harry. And as I look at your list, it's Harry into Diplex. So do you want to make the case for Harry over Diplex to kick us off?
I'll make the case for Diplex under Harry. And it's kind of how I want to frame it, because when I was constructing my list, like I had like a clear tier below this, and like these 2 were a bit neck and neck in some ways, because it's different and it's the same, where they're both kind of new in their team, but wildly different expectations, right? Like for me, I think Diplex had one of the easiest jobs a mid laner could have, which is come into a high-functioning team with a really fucking good jungler and a really lane-dominant bot lane, and just do your job, man. Like, Fudge is one of the best top laners in the league. Blabber's one of the best junglers in the league. Your bot lane has an X80 carry playing support in an 80 carry support meta, dumpstering every 2v2. Just do your job.
I didn't think about it that way.
Just do your fucking job, man. And the fact that C9 hasn't looked that good, and the fact that the ask on him, in my opinion, was relatively small, has pushed him way down my list to the point where I'm even like debating putting him lower now than I have him at 6.
You're talking.
And Harry, let's talk a little bit about Harry. I've felt like he's been a little bit invisible in that he's not the reason TL is like losing their games. Like there's a conspicuous presence in the top lane. It's a bit more obvious, right? But at the same time, has he really created much for himself? And then I have these few moments that really stick out in my mind where he's playing team fights and then he sees an angle that would exist at a lower level of play, and he goes for the angle, like the Azir team fight where he goes for a 4 or 5 man shuffle and gets 3 flashes and dies and loses his team to Baron and loses to the team fight. Really, really, in the context of the game, a huge error, very costly error in that team fight. And that comes with experience and time where that was a really rookie mistake where you're shuffling in, looking for a shuffle, but it's just going to get flashed and you're exposing yourself to the whole MAT and you kind of die for free on Azir.
Right.
You need to be that guy who can't die, who's doing max damage. So I think he's got some growing pains still, and he very much is kind of like a rookie mid. And he's not like the JoJo was a rookie mid. He's kind of like, he's just got some growing to do. But at the same time, I think that he looks really serviceable inside that roster. He's not the reason they're losing the games, and he's playing his matchups in the expected. He's getting the expected result out of his matchups frequently. Yeah. So he's doing, I would say, well for a rookie. Overall.
You may have actually convinced me that Harry belongs above Diplex. I think the most compelling argument you make is actually the that first argument you made around Diplex, which is what the team setups are around the player, right? And then therefore what is demanded of the player to look, middling, or like to look serviceable, right? And I didn't lend that kind of a lens to it when looking at Diplex, and like, oh yeah, actually, if you asked me preseason, okay, you're gonna play mid for one of the LCS teams, which team would you like to get inserted into?
C9, please.
It's probably C9. They're the championship winning team, and I get to be the only piece that changes. Okay, great. I will happily hop onto that roster because my expectation is that I won't have to do that much outside of go along for the ride. And I think that's I think what I had originally, just to try and make my case, after I've already kind of conceded that I would flip-flop
I'm listening.
hearing Artemis, well, is that I think, again, I'm isolating a couple individual moments from Diplex that I feel like have been higher highs, I think.
Which are those?
Silas, so basically his assassin play. There was like a Silas Akali game that he played. I was just looking for it, and I don't.
It was in week 1, right?
Was that week 1? He played Silas in week 1, but it wasn't against Akali. So unless I'm misremembering the matchup, or Google has it wrong, he did play Silas against Golden Guardians. But it says Curie played Aurelia, so something's wrong on
Google.
Way. Point is, I remember a few kind of more highlight moments, and I guess when I get to the middle of my table and I think about who could break into the top 5, I was leaning more towards, okay, who is going to do something more spectacular as an individual? And I think just, if we're going to even just talk about play styles, Diplex is the kind of player who I think is going to look for bigger plays, LCS big plays, than Harry will, right? And so I was largely giving him credit for those few highs that I saw of like, hey, this guy, I think, finding stability, finding consistency is going to elevate him into the top 5. Like, he has more potential. I guess I was rating him more on his potential to get into the top 5 if things fell into place. But again, upon hearing your arguments, I do think he was set up with a higher baseline, but by virtue of his team. So I think I'm gonna flippy flop on this one and go ahead and throw Harry above Diplex with Artemis here. But I do think that one's close. And I think what's cool about what I will say is what I think about that's cool about these two players is that they are young and new to the league this split, and they are already in the 6-7 spots. Above a few players that we're now going to talk about have been around. And I just think that's very cool to see young players come in and not absorb only the bottom tier slots. So we've got 8, 9, 10. For me, my 8 is a Blaze Olive. I I guess actually, as I'm looking at it, all three of ours are the same. So we go in order: Ablaze Olive, Palafox, Jensen. And I think a lot of people might be surprised to hear the name Jensen come in at the end of a list. I almost want to start on that and then work up.
Please do.
To Palafox and Ablaze Olive. All right, well, 0-6. Let's just get that out of the way. Right? If you haven't produced a winning game, it's going to make it really tough for anyone, right, to make an argument or a case for how you individually are spectacular in your role. Like, you'd have to literally be 1v9ing and still having your Nexus die, and that's just not the case at all with Jensen. I think Jensen is starting to find that his old style of play is just, it's not possible. Well, should have figured this out a while ago. But I think I'm realizing that regardless of his willingness or his ability to pick up the champions that might be relevant in the meta, he's still not playing them the way that they should be played in the meta, if that makes sense. He's kind of playing them to his old style, which is still jungle mid 2v2 centric. And that to me is honestly like, I'll just use Bjergsen as the counter to this. Is like, Bjergsen is someone who I've watched start to evolve. Right, as two mid laners who existed in the same era of the LCS and were equally dominant at different times, but all throughout the same era. One of them has really started to evolve and adjust, and the other one hasn't. And so, while producing winless games, and I don't see anything that makes me believe Jensen's gonna all of a sudden turn the corner in this mid lane meta.
God, no.
He takes the final spot for me.
It was easy for me to put Jensen 10th. It was easy, and I didn't even feel bad about it because I was just so angry by watching him, the way they drafted for him, and then the way he played so many times this season. Like, oh god, it's basically like a few times I really felt like he was removing accountability from his shoulders entirely. Like, there was some spots where, like, there's a classic. It was a red side game, week 2. He's going to 5th pick. Enemy team has, like, I don't know, maybe they had like a Maokai or something, like they had Ashe. I forget. It was like they had a crazy Silas angle for him on 5 where, like, yeah, maybe it was not the best matchup. I think he was against like Azir or something, but like any other mid laner in the LCS, like, you could never do this because, like, they're just going to pick Silas in a good spot and they're going to run over the game. Jensen picked Victor on 5 against Azir.
Yeah,
totally.
It was against 100 Thieves.
It was against 100 Thieves. Is this game a thing we have? Yeah, I think this is the game. I don't know if this was the exact game.
It may, okay.
If it was a week 2 R5 Victor,
that was week 2. I guess he played Victor both games, so this was the other one in week 2. Maybe it was this one.
I think it was this one.
Yeah, this one makes more sense.
Varus, Rakan, ulti.
Yeah.
I think it was maybe it was against JoJo. I don't remember. But regardless, like, he's picking the Victor against Azir, and he's not piloting it the way that it's meant to be piloted in that matchup. Like, the Victor should be pressing the Azir early, like walking forward, like trying to generate something for himself. And it should be on the Azir to do things. Like, they should blow the Victor's flash and, like, they should repeat after 6. And then if you can coordinate well enough, like, after 6, the Azir side will begin to shift it because of the pressure with their shuffle. But I didn't even see, like, a willingness to even attempt to do that on the early Victor levels. He was just kind of getting bodied, and then he's misplaying his flash, and the games just got away from him quickly.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's not generating anything for his teammates. And then in their most recent game where Dignitas had some signs of life, it really had nothing to do with Jensen at all. It was totally the Armin show where he was
actually.
He was on Jace.
He had the Jace.
He, like, took top tower, took mid tower, took, like, top T2, took mid T2. He took, like, 4 turrets in that game. He was pressuring side really well. Like, where was Jensen that whole game? Like, I don't know. It just felt like Armin is totally by himself in that game against Team Liquid. And that's the game where, remind me of the draft. I don't know if you can. It was the game from TL. It was Dignitas TL.
Dignitas. He was playing Jack's top lane. You want the mid lane matchup?
I want the mid lane matchup.
It was Harry on Victor versus Jensen on Silas.
Yeah, and, like, man, that's the game where
Harry went 7-2-4. By the way, Jensen went 0-4-4.
I could have swore that this was a Jace game, not a Jax game.
So that one. The Jace game was the day before, actually.
Who did they play on their first day then with the Jace game?
Yeah, it was Immortals.
They lost to Immortals on day 1.
Okay. Yeah, it was the Jace top lane with Sedge in support. And again, they ran over the top a little bit.
They did, yeah. I mean, in both those cases, I have to ask a lot from Jensen because those are against, like, our, like, kind of weakest, not weakest, but they're 2 mids that he should be expected to kind of beat up on.
Totally.
You know, like, Harry is, like, this is your first year in LCS. Jensen, he's been here before. And it's a mage meta. I should be betting on Jensen.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's not like that means that he's low.
That's the thing. I actually was willing to. I would have given Jensen more credit in summer when it was way more Akali and Silas, right?
Sure.
Like purely that. But when people are playing Talia, Ryze, Azir, and Victor, I'm like, what more do you want out of that? I mean, like Syndra and Orianna would be the ideal meta for him, right? But it's like, yeah, I'm a little frustrated as well, given that this actually does, from a mid lane meta perspective, feel like champions that fit in his wheelhouse. Yes, the way the game is played nowadays demands a slightly different style of play on those champions with your team, and maybe that's just the bridge that he can't seem to gap. He can't cross. I don't know, but I've been disappointed with the whole of Dignitas, and so I don't want Jensen being in 10th on this list to be the reduction of why Dignitas is doing poorly. They're doing poorly for a lot of reasons. But by the same token, when people were looking at this roster in preseason, the only reason people rated them anywhere, above 10th in the standings was because of 3 names. Armit, Santin, and Jensen. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And saying that those 3 individuals are at least good enough as individuals. And so that has not been proven to us here so far. Palafox and Blazov, though. There are 8-9, so we're going to work back up the list here. For me, really, I think the difference between these 2 players, while I think it's fairly minimal, comes more from the activity of Immortals. And I think we've said this before, or I've said this before, I'm always going to give a little bit more stock to teams that are winning in an active fashion versus, I know you don't like the word, I'm going to use it because people understand it, a more passive fashion, right? Like CLG's approach to a lot of games has been the draft for late, just try and survive and not lose our heads. And they've lost their heads a lot, and so that's not solely on Palafox, no. But I just think that a Blaze Olive on picks like the Talia, the Ryze, whatever, have gotten to the side lane on average 0.5 more times per game. It's just like I think he's just out indexing him in a few categories individually that makes me put him slightly above.
Yeah, this was a toss-up for me, and it's hard for me to know too much about CLG because I feel like the way they lose games is like not individually at all.
No,
right? They just kind of like fall apart inexplicably. And I kind of, the reason I put Palafox below a Blaze Olive is I have some high highs from a Blaze Olive where I was impressed with his team fighting. There was an Azir game that I really liked. It was Azir Kindred game. His Kindred game. He was on Azir. I thought he had a really nice Azir game in that game. And then I shouldn't hold Palafox accountable for CLG's drafts, but I remember Palafox's
all your fault.
Palafox Irelia game. No, that was not it. Like the fact that I had to watch the Irelia game, like really
I'm with you though.
Knocked him down because it was questionable to pick it, and then once he was on it in the game, really didn't justify it. Didn't even look like he had like a high level of competency on the pick. So yeah, I was like, okay, I'm waiting. Like maybe you can show me something, and he didn't show me anything. Yeah. So no more Irelia for Palafox.
I feel you.
I've seen enough.
I feel you. All right, well there you have it. Those are our tier lists, our mid lane tier lists for week 3 of the LCS. As a quick reminder, mine was Vikla, Bjergsen, Maple, Gory, Jojo, Diplex, Harry, Blaze Olive, Palafox, and closing out with Jensen.
Yeah, I did Vikla, Jojo, Maple, Gory, Bjergsen. That's my pretty solid top 5. And then Harry and Diplex I have just kind of on the outside looking in, and then somewhere really below that is a Blaze Olive, Palafox, and Jensen, with Jensen really solidly at the caboose.
There you have it. So we'll see how each of these 10 performs this week. They've got 3 games to close out their first round robin. Maybe change our minds a little bit. Who knows? Maybe we'll reflect on this list at the top of next week's episode real quick, just to see if anybody changed our minds.
And I think that my biggest mover on this probably is going to be either Diplex or a Blaze Olive. I feel like a Blaze Olive or Diplex is going to shoot up the standings for me. I think those are the 2 highest likelihood.
Yeah, for me, because I put JoJo in 5th, I think he has potential, because he has potential to hit number 1 again, technically, right? I think it's going to be hard to take that away from Vikla currently, but we'll see. And then, outside of that, I would actually say somebody like Harry, I think, has super, super high potential, given the pieces that he has around him. Sweet. Let us know in the comments as well what you guys think of our lists, who you agree with, disagree with. Maybe put your whole 10 in there as well. because I'm curious what people think. And while you're at it, like, comment, subscribe, do all that fun stuff as we transition into our Week 3 discussion for the LCS. And so, as I said, with 15 whole games on the table this week, we're not going to work through them one at a time. Instead, what we've done is we've picked our match of the week, and we're going to discuss that one pretty in depth, our thoughts there, what we'd like to see. And then each of us have come to the table with our most likely upset, I'll say. We took a look at the schedule for this week, and we'll see. Maybe the games will surprise, but a lot of them, contrary to what Week 3 was like, they feel like they're sure things. I mean, like, most of the matchups, I feel like, predictions-wise, have clear favorites, and will be difficult for the underdog team to win. But we'll see. We'll see. Game of the week. What did we choose?
Game of the week. Game of the week is the first game of the week.
Getting it out of the way
I don't
early.
know why they did that. Yeah, they put the most compelling game, like, first game of the day on Wednesday, and then your LCS is over for the week. It's not quite that bad, but it's 100 Thieves Evil Geniuses.
Which is a dope matchup.
Dope matchup for a lot of reasons. I think right away I'm looking at JoJo to have another good game, because this is coming off the back of him really handling Diplex and really handling C9. EG dominated that game on the back of JoJo without that kind of Tristana performance. Like, he's really 1v9ing. FBI had a game for himself too. Those two 80 carries in that game were really untouchable. And yeah, 100 Thieves, on the other hand, they are almost going in the other direction where, yeah, they lost to FlyQuest, and you could maybe expect that. But their game against Team Liquid was unconvincing. Wait, who did they barely beat?
Well, they would have barely beat Team Liquid because they lost to FlyQuest, right?
Yeah, I'm just doubting myself. I have to make sure that I'm correct.
And my phone's
It is Team Liquid. Okay, I was really yes, second guessing myself. But that game, I don't know. Can we jump into that game?
Go
so
for it.
The 100 Thieves Team Liquid game was weird for me because it really felt like Team Liquid lost their heads and gave Doublelift like his dream scenario for almost no reason. Like, that was the game where Doublelift got like 4 kills and found himself 6-0 on Caitlyn and totally walked over the game. There was this like play on topside where Team Liquid were contesting topside and basically won the situation. But they got a pick and they had like a 5v4 situation on topside. There was a Rift Herald play and they got like aced in a 45 and Doublelift got like 4 kills. And I remember looking at the player cam, and 100 Thieves players looked kind of tilted, and Doublelift was like laughing his ass off. And we were watching the game just super tilted with what Team Liquid was doing because it was almost inexplicable. Like, they killed one, and then they totally misplayed the team fight. And then from that position, 100 Thieves easily won that game.
Runs over it.
But yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I mean, what I was just saying, I had something different from the bot lane. So if you wanted to close out that thought, I want to let you close that.
Yeah, okay. And then from what I saw in the FlyQuest game, was a pretty cool draft from both teams. I like the way that both teams were attacking each other in draft. The Zeri was taken away from FlyQuest. It took double of Zeri. And then there was a couple other things touched from bot lane. I think maybe Ashe. And then both teams didn't really want to show their hands too early. Like, 100 Thieves didn't first pick bot lane. Usually you would expect red side to take their blind pick 80 carry on 1-2 red side. But FlyQuest didn't. They chose to take jungle and a soul lane, I think, and they were trying to hide their bot lane. So then 100 Thieves tried kind of an off-meta punish by picking a full bot lane together on 2-3, where only they had like one chance to respond. They actually dropped full bot lane, but they went for the Zyra Khan, and we found Zyra Khan Kai'Sa Nautilus. So really like old school throwback, kind of off-meta 2v2, and it didn't really work. Like, it wasn't anything Doublelift did wrong. Like, Buzio was making some mistakes in that 2v2.
I was gonna say, dying early in that 2v2 from Buzio was pretty
Buzio made some mistakes in that 2v2, and then the game was just kind of getting away from him, and the Xayah was never really able to get online and do anything. And I would have liked to see something more. Like, I didn't, they asked, can you drop to 4-5 and pick something against Zyra Khan? Prince said yes.
Yeah.
I feel like that's an easy ask. Most 80 carries at that level played enough against Zyra Khan where at any moment, any time, they can just bust out like Kate Morgana, Kai'Sa Nautilus, like there's even like Ezra Leona. There's so many things you can play into that. So I wasn't sold on 100 Thieves this weekend. Despite the 1-1, I felt like it was shakier than maybe even it looked.
Okay, so it did trigger a thought for me on bot lane. And I'm with you. Like, I do think FBI and Vulcan are the kind of bot lane that could do a similar thing, right? So like if you pick a Zyrakan into them and leave up a Nautilus, like Vulcan loves him a Nautilus. And that's where I would be looking possibly for EG to get, some advantages if the draft works out that way. My thinking though is that 100 Thieves is going to pivot, to backtrack away from those kinds of picks and back towards like a Zeri Lulu kind of situation, in which case I think that the bot lane will be more of a trade and a wash. And then I go back to the mid lane for where I really think the difference is going to be made. And I love it because this is Bjergsen and JoJo, the two guys that we actually had pretty, separated in our top 5 for mid lanes. And yeah, I think here is where I'm wanting to see out of JoJo that assertion of dominance in the mid lane over Bjergsen. Bjergsen will try and be a rock. Can JoJo take the fight to him, get a small lane advantage, and extend that to the side lanes? I think really is the question here. Someday versus... why am I blanking right now?
Tenacity?
Thank you, Tenacity in the top lane. I kept wanting to say Impact for some reason. I don't know why. It's just like...
He's been there before.
Someday versus Tenacity. That's one I have no idea which way that'll go, especially with things like the Scion creeping back into the meta from a few players. Like I just don't know champion matchup wise how that one's gonna play out. Because I think if we end up in a situation where Tenacity wants to go for a Fiora or something, okay, we're talking about a totally different game. I think more than likely we're going to get the Jax Cassante or something like that in the top lane. I think this game's all about mid lane. I think it's all about mid jungle because I think the drafts are going to draft them into like a stalemate bot.
Yeah, we see that a lot in ball lane, so it's reasonable. I think it's possible, but Tenacity against Someday is a fun one because I think that Tenacity has been looking really good for me.
He's looked great. He solo killed Impact.
He did, and then in the Team Liquid game, he really 1v9 that game. Like Summit was like, I think Summit was even on Renekton that game. Wasn't it like Jax against Renekton?
Yeah.
I think Tenacity was on Jax and Summit was on Renekton. And Tenacity did way more than Summit. There was one instance where Tenacity, like he had TP advantage on top lane. He TP'd to a fight on bot river. They got 2 kills. Summit had just walked top. Like Summit was like late for a dragon. Yeah, Tenacity really outperformed Summit in that game.
Yeah.
Like really outperformed him. And even on the Jax too. And I've been kind of decently impressed from Tenacity's like Ornn kind of frontline play. I thought that's when 100 Thieves looked most dangerous. But if he can break out the Jax too, and like there were some head scratching moments, it wasn't perfect. But if he can keep improving his Jax play, especially in his team fights and like his timings on his flanks, he's getting in good spots. But sometimes the execution is a little bit off. Where sometimes he'll choose to go when he should wait, and sometimes he'll wait when he should go.
Yeah.
But he's in the right spot 9 times out of 10, and I think that is a really good sign for 100 Thieves because he's going to make the adjustments, and he's winning his matchups, and he's putting himself in the position to keep succeeding. So I want to see him keep improving, and I actually think if he's getting the better of Someday, like I think that the game can feel difficult for EG because it's all about if Bjergsen and Closer can kind of like handle JoJo. Yeah, because JoJo is going to do what JoJo does. And I see like from the first 2 weeks, Closer just like sitting mid for Bjergsen. And like we were joking about like, why is this guy always mid? And like what is he? It's like Bjergsen's like corrupting Closer.
He corrupts everyone.
But then in the past couple of games, we didn't see that anymore. And like Closer wasn't like hovering mid as much. So I don't think it's like some style. I think it was more just it happened in those games.
Right.
But against JoJo, pretty effective strategy. You can sometimes just hover mid.
That's true actually.
Because JoJo is going to play on the front foot. He's going to choose to trade with your mid laner, and if you can catch JoJo mid trade, that's a great counter gank timing. And JoJo trades frequently, so there's a lot of opportunities for enemy junglers to influence the way JoJo wants to play the lane, compared to a player who trades less than JoJo in mid. So yeah, I want to see what Closer can get done around mid.
That's an interesting idea. Basically, like if JoJo chooses, if JoJo opts into a matchup where he gets the push, then I would be tempted to say, all right, Closer, what happens if you go mid and try and mess with him? If that's not the case, then I would actually probably be, then I think I'd go all the way back to bot lane again. It just all comes back to bot lane for me. I really see this game as both teams kind of reverting to like, all right, we're going to that 80 carry scaling meta with like an Azir Victor matchup in the mid lane and Maokai Sedge in the jungle. Well, probably not Maokai, but like Sedge Wukong in the jungle and then Jax Cassante. I think these teams are going to go heads up, let's play meta, and see who's the better team in that way. And if that's the case, I give it to 100 Thieves. I think that they've just been the better bot lane team, and I think that's the way they're going to draft. I think if it revolves around the other two lanes, then I give it to EG. If that makes sense. Like, I think
Totally.
100 Thieves' way of winning is bot lane, and I just think that that's where the meta is going to help them, where most often you end up just falling into that when you go through draft.
I want to see teams continue to attack tenacity in game, because I'm just not sold on his side lane play. I'm not sold on his ability to play carries. So if, like, for someday, I think if they're playing some kind of tank versus tank matchup in the top lane, I think that's really benefiting 100 Thieves, because someday, you know, if nothing else, he's an intelligent top laner. He knows how to play side lane.
Yeah.
And I would like to see him try and use that advantage. Like, I usually don't like Jace. I'm really not a Jace apologist, but if there's a good spot for it, similar to, like, you know, the kind of Jace performance we saw in that Dignitas game, like, that's kind of an angle where I feel like you can pressure 100 Thieves. But it's going to be close. This is a really close game.
It is a very close game, and that's why it's our game of the week. Yeah. We really could see this going either way. These teams are neck and neck in the standings.
Let's call it, though. So who do you think?
I'm going 100 Thieves.
You're going
I'm
100
going to go
Thieves?
100 Thieves.
I'm going EG for
Okay.
sure. Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I'm going EG definitely, because I think JoJo is going to handle Bjergsen.
Yeah.
I don't think that Bjergsen.
I do think that's the way they win, if they do.
Yeah, I think JoJo is going to handle Bjergsen, and JoJo will be carrying in that game. I think if we picture the way EG wins that game, JoJo is carrying. JoJo has himself a good game. He's pressuring. He's not inting. He's winning team fights. I think EG has this one.
Not inting is the key.
Yes,
After
not
he gets
inting.
his lead that he's pretty sure to get. Yeah, just like no crazy side lane plays where you get caught out and have overpushed. Same thing for tenacity, right? Yeah, I'm going to go with 100 Thieves just because I'm predicting what I think the draft will look like, and I think 100 Thieves is going to secure themselves a kind of a scaling bot lane situation and just play team fight for the victory over one of their toughest opponents. Cool. That's our game of the week. From here, we're going to go to our two most likely upsets of the week. I think yours came first.
Upset alert.
I think yours came first in the week, so we should just go in order.
I think it was, what, Team Liquid? Yes, I'm pulling this out of my behind. Let me go to week 4.
I was going to say, my phone keeps wigging out on
No,
me.
it was CLG Team Liquid.
Oh, first CLG. Okay,
Team
so
Liquid.
first day, game 3.
Yeah, game 1 or game 3 of day 1, CLG Team Liquid. I think that this is a likely upset.
Right. So
And if I was looking to make a value bet, I might put my money on this game, and here's why. I think that there is some dark magic on CLG. All right, where CLG.
we've all given up on him.
No, but if you did, then good, because we don't want it. Keep it that way. But anyway, CLG has this magic to them where they will beat you if you think you're gonna beat them. They love that shit. Like, if you think that you're gonna smash CLG into the pavement, they get 10 times as big. And as soon as you think that CLG is gonna win, they get really 10 times as small. You know? So in this game, CLG is going to be expected to lose to Team Liquid. So
Yeah.
CLG buff activated, if you're following me, right? So this is not the CLG that is like making crazy ints. This is the CLG that's going to win from down 10k, that is so disciplined and so resilient that you can't crack them.
Okay.
So this game is going to play out with CLG has an outscaling draft, and Summit is going to donate them enough gold where their outscaling draft is going to become playable. And it's going to be, Team Liquid is going to be pressing. Team Liquid is going to have a small advantage. Couple dragons, 3, 4, 5k. CLG is going to have outscaling draft, withstand the pressure from Team Liquid, and it's going to win this game. Honestly, I think they could even make it look pretty easy. I think there's a chance that Team Liquid really falls apart in this game.
Really?
Yeah, really falls apart in this game.
Wow.
Because it was just bad last week. I was really horrified by the Team Liquid I saw against 100 Thieves last week.
Gotcha.
And CLG, I can trust to upset teams when it doesn't matter. And right now it doesn't matter because it's just a random game in the middle of the season with no stakes at all, where CLG is the underdog. So for me, upset watch game 3.
Alrighty, there you have it. So that's a 2-4 CLG over a 3-3 Team Liquid. I'm gonna go back to the schedule real quick to find mine. Okay, so all right, I have like a reasonable one, And then I'm going to follow up with the one that I think is like...
An unreasonable
but like, hear me out. You know? You know what I mean? Like one of those. Okay. So my reasonable one as well comes on day one. And it's actually the last game of the day. So it would be Golden Guardians over TSM. A 2-4 Golden Guardians over a 3-3 TSM. A lot of that is predicated on the idea that Golden Guardians first 2 weeks, 0-4... was kind of an unfair 0-4, right? And so I think just psychologically, like a lot of us have to get past like, okay, they weren't going to beat the top 4 teams. They don't need to beat a top 4 team here. They just need to beat like a top 6 team here, right? And so well within their reach. Momentum, another big thing. But beyond that, I think River and Gory have been absolutely spectacular. And when I think about TSM and the working elements of TSM, it's Boogie and Maple, right? And so I think this 2v2 matchup is incredibly important. Yes, I do think Maple is slightly better than Gory. I don't know if I would maybe say that Boogie, I don't know. Boogie and Gory, I think, are more different, especially in like, I mean, you got River rather on things like Poppy. I think that ultimately Golden Guardians is going to ride their momentum, and I think this is a good matchup for Licorice because Solo's going to play tanks, right? And so in most matchups where Licorice is the liability of Golden Guardians, I don't think he's going to get exposed in this matchup. And so the rest of the map can do the work, right? I kind of hope we end up in a situation where it's like Scion on one side, Ornn on the other. Or, hell, bring your Gragas back if you want, Licorice. Like, at this point,
don't bring your
Gragas back. But, like, if you did bring it, this would probably be the game where I'd be okay with it. And Huhi and Stixxay, I think, have been the better bot lane here than Chime and Neo. Especially in lane, right? Again, I think that Chime and Neo have been a bit of a liability in lane, and I think that Huhi and Stixxay have actually started to up their aggression week over week. They've found some 2v2 kills. And so I just think that because the top lane won't be as abusable as it normally is on the Golden Guardians side, TSM's not going to create a topside advantage and therefore slowly lose out on the bottom side of the map. So that would be my case for Golden Guardians win over TSM, which I think is a reasonable call, but it's still a 2-4 over a 3-3, so it's a minor upset.
I think it's totally reasonable, and I like identifying the top lane matchup too, because I think that whenever Licorice can be stable, that really helps GG, because in the games where they've lost badly, it's usually because something's going really wrong on top side.
Right. Turrets dropping early, or a couple kills have gone through. Yeah. So that's kind of now here's my... Hear me out.
Nothing good ever comes after hear me
out. So it's my other upset pick, the outside upset pick of the week would be the final game of the whole week. Mm-hmm. Golden Guardians again over 100 Thieves. And I'm curious where you are on this, because again, I think if 100 Thieves gets to play exactly the style they want, then I don't think that Golden Guardians has a shot, right? If we get the Zeri Lulu and we get to the 30-minute point, no, you're not going to out-team fight 100 Thieves in that 80 carry situation. But again, I think that Licorice can ideally... He's blue side on this, I believe, on this one, just because they're listed first, so I'm assuming they're going to choose blue side here, right? So from blue side, I would just look to, again, hyper protect, put him on some kind of a tank scaling thing, and not die to tenacity. That's your homework assignment is don't die to tenacity in lane. And then I would actually be really, really curious to see if Gory can do a bit of what we're asking JoJo to do over Bjergsen, right? I think that's the homework assignment for Golden Guardians beating 100 Thieves, is actually goes to the mid lane for them. And it's about, can Gory kind of do what we want to see JoJo do against 100 Thieves and then get to the bot lane and affect it. If they can do that, I actually do think that Huhi and Stixxay, again, can abuse maybe some of the inexperience of Busio in lane, and they can get a bot side win, funnily enough. But it would have to be an earlier bot side win, not a late game bot side win, if that makes sense. So maybe they're playing the Lux Caitlyn, and they're just being an aggro. Or what was it, Karma? What did they play? They played Karma. Ezreal Karma, something like that. Just hyper push in the bot lane, and then bring River down on Poppy constantly. Drake control. I think that's the way they do it. Again, I wouldn't predict it, but that would be my like more disparate upset call.
I wouldn't put your money on it
No.
if I were you.
No, don't do that.
Because the top lane, the reason that we think it's not going to go bad for GG is the reason that I'm so comfortable predicting 100 Thieves, because it's kind of like the only way it goes wrong for 100 Thieves is if Tenacity is like kind of not really like performing, either like he's a little bit like off timing or he doesn't really know how to pressure his side. So 100 Thieves is like forced to 5v5. And like, yeah, I could see a situation where 100 Thieves is maybe forced to 5v5 because Tenacity doesn't really, he's kind of lost inside the game. I got 100 Thieves in the 5v5. You know, I don't think 100 Thieves is going to get out 5v5'd by GGS, because if you see what I mean? Because that's where it's hard for me to buy it. So there needs to be some asymmetry in the early game. I can't have both teams playing the same way. If there is distinct win condition that's drastically different, like if one team is playing like Pike support and like getting the heck to top side, right? And then 100 Thieves is playing some scaling. That's a really extreme example of it, but
sure.
I need to see some asymmetry through draft.
Okay.
I think from GGS to maybe open up 100 Thieves a little bit more, because I think if you keep the game stable, the game will just kind of become a Ram 5v5, because neither top laner is really going to be pressuring the side lane.
Yeah.
And then in that a Ram 5v5 state, my money's on 100 Thieves 10 times out of 10.
Okay. No, that's super fair. I mean, again, like, yeah, I think you stack those players up on all the same champions across from each other. 100 Thieves wins 99 out of 100 times, right? Like, absolutely. So that's an interesting thought too, right? Is like, what if we just literally just draft whenever you start to see 100 Thieves draft the opposite. Just draft a different style, right? And try and make the game messy. But yeah, again, I don't think that's a likely upset, but it is probably my, of the ones that are more than a game differential, because that's the thing. Most of the upsets that I think we're willing to call are like a 2-4 over a 3-3. This would be more than a one game differential, and that would be the one I would pick. But a lot of the games this week, they feel like they're sure things. Of course, we say that, and that's always the time that things start to go haywire. And we'll have to see. But either way, we close out the first round robin this week, which is always very interesting to see how things settle at the end, because I find that a lot of times you get through week 1 or week 2, and both when I was on the broadcast or even now just as a part of the community, like so quick to jump to conclusions about this team's doomed or overhyped or whatever, this player's washed. And then a lot of times by the end of the first round robin, when things normalize a little bit and everyone's had the same matchups, you get to a place where you're like, CLG, they fell back down, right? That 2-0 week 1 for CLG that made everyone think like, oh my God, is this a top 3 team? Like people started to want to have that discussion, how quickly they've fallen back down to earth. Golden Guardians, what a washed, trash team. They're 0-4. They, garbage. Oh wait, they just went 2-0 and now with like 3 winnable games, I think they'll finish 4-5. They could finish 5-4, right? But even then, it's like, that just changes your whole perception of teams once you get to the end of the first 9.
Yeah, I really don't I don't pass judgment in the regular season too hard, because like I have that pro coach bias in me where it's like, it's just a best of 1.
Right.
And like, I think it's an ego thing.
When we've seen, sorry to interrupt, but we've seen 6 total games out of how many games at this point in the split would you have played, like with scrims included, right? So that's,
hundreds.
We just have...
They've played hundreds of games.
We have a shallow perception.
And it's true. But also, like, I want to see the teams compete with stakes. That's my problem with the best of ones, there's a lack of stakes. It's like we win where we get a win in the standings, we lose, we get a loss in the standings. But outside of that, it's really not tangible. Compare that to a best of series in the LCS where you show up to play 5 games. If you lose, you go home and your season's over. Totally different mindset. So like, I'm just itching to where we can get these teams with their blood up, and like we can identify some of these matchups before, like the FlyQuest 100 Thieves game from last week. Like I think both teams had their blood up in that game, and we got a really, really exciting game from FlyQuest and 100 Thieves. That felt like a playoff game.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited for more of those matchups that you really rarely get in a best of 1, and especially during the first half of the first round robin, you rarely get games with stakes. So as we get into the middle of the season and as we get towards the end, we'll start to see games matter more because we have some bunches in the standings, and I think we're only going to get more bunched.
Yeah.
If you picture GGS coming up the way we think they're going to come up, what the standings will look like, it will be FlyQuest undefeated at the top, everybody bunched together, and then Dignitas at the bottom. And and that's what our standings will look like as we get into the middle and the end of the season. So, like, I'm excited for where we're going because it's shaping up to be a bookended 8 teams that are all competing for the same playoff spots.
Yeah.
So that's going to be sick.
Look, no doubt, week 3, week 4 are like 2 of the toughest weeks because of what you're talking about. The stakes, while technically tomorrow's game is as relevant as the opening game of the season and is as relevant as the last game of the regular season,
we're right in the middle.
It does not feel that way in any way, shape, or form. And so definitely, unless you are playing a team that you're kind of like literally tied with in the standings, and so you're like, oh, this is a big swing for us in the head-to-head, and we'll actually, outside of that, yeah, stakes don't feel as much there. But that's also where, like, I'm going to turn this into a bit of an interview before we close out the episode. I'm curious how you as a coach then dealt with these periods of the year. Like when you talk to players, because I'm sure this is a sentiment that is somewhat shared by players. Like you're in the dip and the lull of your season. Like, how do you keep that intensity up? How do you keep that drive to win, as high as it was the day before? Yeah, they're all competitors. They want to win. But, like, I'm sure there's a difference between, today and the last day of the split, if that makes sense.
It's an hour-long answer coming. No, but I mean, so first, like, motivation comes and goes. The best know this, and the best don't rely on their motivation to hit the level that they need to hit in practice. They rely on their discipline because they understand that motivation comes and goes. So I need to act according to my values.
Okay.
And they practice that every day, so that when it gets to the middle of the season and they're lacking some motivation and maybe somebody lesser might not be able to show up in practice, they have the grit and the resilience because they show up every day and they practice their discipline so that when it's hard, they can still do it. That's what the greats do. And we see that a lot. You also have players who do struggle with lack of motivation in the season. As we're human, we're all human, and it totally happens. And of course, you can't replace intrinsic motivation. If there's a fire inside you, there's nothing better than that, right? But there are things that you can do from the outside to like help somebody who's feeling a little bit demotivated. You're either going to do something on one end of the spectrum or the other, but either you tighten up or you loosen up, basically. Mm-hmm. And if I want to tighten up, I would try and raise the stakes in practice, and I'd try and raise the stakes in competition. It's going to be different for every player, but if I had a really ego-motivated player, I might try and identify some kind of narrative or some kind of storyline in the game coming up that maybe they didn't think about before that could maybe add a little bit of extra stakes to the game for them the weekend. Same in practice. Like maybe, stupid example, but like if I had like JoJo against Bjergsen in practice and JoJo's having a hard time focusing, I'm like, dude, this is the fucking GOAT. Like, you're going to get shit on by the GOAT 5 games today, man. Like, you got to step up. Like, and so you find ways to raise the stakes for them in practice because that's ultimately what allows them to reach a higher level of focus. It's when the task is that perfect level of difficulty where it's hard enough where it's a challenge,
right?
But it's not too hard and it's not too easy, right? And oftentimes in the regular season, this shit's way too easy for them. So it's about getting them in that optimal zone. Fun question.
Yeah,
fun.
Very,
question.
very cool, and could be its own hour-long podcast.
Yeah, God, I'd love to go detailed on
I'm
that.
Certain
and this is a plug. If that was interesting to you and you want to learn more, come to my website and book some private coaching because so much of solo queue and competitive league is about the mindset and it's about how you attack the game and how you attack your practice.
Totally.
And we can definitely unlock some things in you too.
Well, there you have it. There's a bit of a shorter episode, but that's all right. They're not all going to be the same length. We hope you enjoyed it ahead of week 3 LCS. Like Artemis said, go check out his Twitter. Go check out his website. Go utilize him for some coaching. Get better. I'm going to do the same. And while you're at it, go ahead and follow my Twitter, my YouTube, all of that kind of stuff. There'll be links in the description for you to follow. Like, comment, subscribe, do all of that. It really, really, really does help us signal boost the podcast and get this thing shared with as many eyes and ears as possible. All that said, again, 3 days of the LCS this week. So Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we will be watch partying on my Twitch, twitch.tv/thejamesdash, starting at 1:15, 1:30 when the broadcast starts. We'll see you then. Until tomorrow, stay healthy, stay safe, and be good to each other. Peace out.